I think it'd be a fun activity if you predict, you write down on your form right now what you predict the score to be, and then see it how many you got right by the end. Yeah, that's good. We'll take some bets, see who scored perfectly, but that requires you to be perfectly honest, which may or may not be good. You're like, there are fun-looking balls up there. Hey, it's 10:45. That means that I'm going to start. Because I timed myself doing this, and it was 3.5 hours, so I hope you guys are ready. Okay, this game, I'm already starting. This talk is called Fun Things Are Fun, the 10 Things I Learned About Game Design from Carl Ronke. And I'm going to explain what I mean by all of the words I just said in this talk. That's kind of like the point of talks, I guess. And I'm going to try to navigate the fact that I'm just too tall to make this not look awkward every time I have to bend over. But that is what it is, right? So my name is Pete Vigeant, and I'm going to string along a lot of crazy ideas, and hopefully everyone will take something nice away from this. But first I really wanted to just open up with a game. And so this is a really simple game. I need everyone to stand up. And I want you to do your best. You're going to use your hands in this game. It doesn't require too much physicality. I see if you have a cast thing or something like that, do it within your comfort level. But what you need to do is you need to all put your right hand out and put it out flat like this. There, that's good. And you need to put your left hand out and put it down like this. And what I need in the room is everyone needs to meet each other in this long string where one finger is pointed down onto someone else's. Yeah, so that means if you're up in front, you have to go find a way to attach and make the nice little chain. This game is called Gotcha. And so you should be touching. You should be touching. And we'll just assume that everyone has kind of figured it out. Or like go around to the ends. If you're in the very back, maybe come around and chain it.
That's why I'm
Yeah.
close enough, but there's no.
Or you can switch hands. I mean, you can if you have to turn around.
No, I have like a double. We have two left. I have like a double link where I'm like this.
Oh, a double link. Well, that's fine too. That's a fine double link. That's okay. Double links are totally acceptable. It's not scientific here. Okay. The way that Gotcha works.
No, you said double links are acceptable.
It's okay if there's a double. It's fine. It's fine. It's actually I'm doing this to elicit the reaction that you have right now and the one that you're going to have in 3 seconds, which is that I'm going to count down. I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, go. And what you need to do is you need to simultaneously grab the person's finger that you're holding and escape the grab with your other.
Okay.
So to demonstrate, this is what you should look like in theory, in principle, or if you are the best player. But most of you are just going to be like, ah! Okay, here we go. This is the only time we get to do it. So this is permadeath rules. Okay? 3, 2, 1, go!
Did everybody win or did everybody lose?
Yes. I think we're all winners. Great. So as I said, my name is Pete Vigeant. This is my 3rd talk about Carl Ronke this year, and so I wanted to give a little preface to my talk before I get to the 10 things I learned about game design. So I have one quick excuse to make and 4 prefaces that I think are going to be required reading for this. So the quick excuse is that basically all of my other talks I read or I read. I spent a lot of time writing and thinking how clever I am with words. And then I was watching videos of me at other talks and I was like, oh gee, I'm completely frozen and stuck to the script, and it looks really terrible. And so I really need to do what the great advice is, which is just work from an outline and not memorize it and not write it all out. So I'm going to do my best to do that, and you guys are my guinea pigs. I hope you enjoy it. Also, that means that if I go off on a really weird tangent, it's because I'm really trying to figure out what I meant with like 3 words. Okay, preface number 1, what is this talk and why should I care? In brief, I'm going to explore the 10 rules about game design that I learned from Carl Ronke, and as I said, I've done 2 other talks about Carl before. One was at IndieK East, and it was about Carl Ronke as being a really important figure in the history of indie game design. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the other one was at Games for Change, and it was about how live action games are really great ways that educators can elicit change in their students or positive both social and academic characteristics. This is not going to be really as much of an academic talk. It's much more about me and my experiences as a game designer and what I've learned and picked up from doing a lot of field game design in my life. And a lot of these lessons fall into a general category of design. So if you are a game designer, then hopefully this will be valuable to you. But if you're not, if you're just kind of someone who's interested in being a better designer, and I always kind of try to say that a designer is also a problem solver, and so everyone has to solve problems in their life, so they're probably designers somewhere in their life, and hopefully, therefore, this talk is about life lessons, maybe, who knows. So preface number 2, who is Carl Ronke? Carl Ronke is a master of game design, although he would never call himself that. He has decades of experience, I think over 50 years creating games, and most of his games have been on the field. And he's a pioneer in experiential education. He has several books where he outlines hundreds, if not thousands of games and how to play them. Games that he's created in the last 50 years or 60 years. He started with Outward Bound and then went on to help found something called Project Adventure, where they spread adventure courses throughout the East Coast at first and then throughout the world. In fact, Carl Ronke built the challenge course at MIT about 20 years ago, so you can go check that out. There was a time in our past, and I'm going to oversimplify this, but there was a time where you may remember that there were only several board games that most people knew. And like Monopoly, Risk, etc., Trivial Pursuit. And now that's not necessarily true. You can go to the most unsophisticated board game cabinets, and there are new games there. People are aware that there are new games. The same thing happened in field games. In the 1960s and 1970s, there were only a handful of games that everyone kind of knew. And then there were a whole bunch of regionally specific games. Most of them were really, really dangerous, which was awesome. Carl Ronke was kind of the guy who came in and said, okay, here's 500 new games for you guys to play. And so everyone in this room has possibly played a Carl Ronke game, but in the same way that field games are kind of like ghost stories. They change and they are passed along, and so you never know where the origin is unless you listen to me when I'm telling you. Okay, preface number 3 is who am I? My name is Pete Vigeant. That's the 3rd time I said that today. The reason I say it 3 times or more is because the first time I did a talk about Carl Ronke, there was a nice article that written up, and it says, Carl Ronke talks about his decades of experience. And a picture of me, and I was just like, oh, how is that possible? How is it possible that I started with Outward Bound in 1960? I work for a company called ESI Design. I'm a senior designer there. It's an experiential design company in New York. We actually have a very large institution that is almost completed. Will open in March here in Boston, across from the JFK Library. If you go there, you will be able to see what it is. I've done a huge interactive in there. I also am a founding partner of a consulting group called The Completely Surrounded. We do large games for all sorts of folks. And so we've done conference games and just all sorts of stuff. I did all the activity curriculum for IB Tech Camps for 5 years. I also helped run something called Come Out and Play, which is a live-action game festival and digitally augmented game festival in New York City every year. We're about to celebrate our 10th year, so I really encourage you guys to come out and check it out this next summer, because it's amazing. I started the family field day of that festival 3 years ago. And I also, I kind of got inspired to really become a game designer because I helped work on a project called Pac-Manhattan when I was a student at ITP. I was with a whole bunch of other students at ITP. And some people are smiling because you may remember it. We just celebrated our 10th anniversary this year. And Pac-Manhattan, we turned the area around Washington Square Park into a digitally augmented Pac-Man board, and we all played it with our bodies. It was a lot of fun. So I've done video games also. Many of my games are live action games, some are digitally augmented. I do have some board games, but I've done video games, but the video games that I would be really proud to show you guys, I can't talk about. So, but those are something that will be hopefully released by the end of the year. So that's kind of cool, and so, you know, write me an email like in December and say, hey, you told me you were going to show some video games, and then I'll show you. Cool.
Really?
Yeah, sure, if you'd like to. You can ask me. No worries. I'll actually tweet at me. It's much easier. Okay, this is the fourth preface. Why is game design important? That's a whole talk, right? That's a whole talk. Why is game design important? Presumably you're here because you're like an enthusiastic participant in the game design world, or you just are an enthusiastic observer of the game design world or the indie game scene, or you think that this is an MIT class and you got lost, which is also kind of cool because then, you know, I'll put it on my resume. There are, here's a non-cited statement, there are more games now than there have ever been in the history of mankind ever. And the reason that I feel like I can say that pretty authoritatively is because games don't go away, and so every time a new Madden comes out, it doesn't replace the old Madden, right? So that means that, that's a really easy thing, that games have had this growth, which is absolutely amazing and terrifying at the same time. It's terrifying if you're someone who either makes games or wants to play them because you really have no idea which ones are the ones to play. And especially lately, the discussion has been, well, wait a minute, the curators who are telling me which ones to play, what are their intentions? And do they just have better marketing budgets or nicer friends or whatever? And so it's really cool. A really cool moment in the world, because we have this new form of design, a new artistic expression that anyone can participate in, that all of us can go out and make the game right now. And that's awesome. Like that's like having cameras. We've never had cameras before. But in the same way, it's hard to curate and understand what's out there because of that. And it's also, just because we all have really nice cameras doesn't mean that we can all photograph a wedding properly. Some games are really unique and daring, and that's why they stand out. And games like Johann Sebastian Joust, and this is my first Joust reference, but I'll reference it 2 more times if I stick to the script. But Johann Sebastian Joust is a game where Doug Wilson said, okay, there's a screen, and let's make the screen, let's not play a video game on the screen, let's play it out here in the world. And of course, that's something that I love. And it's really interesting, you get interesting results as a designer when you think differently about the problem, and you change your point of view about the problem. And one of the benefits of doing something like field game design is it forces you to solve 4 different issues, and then it makes you stronger as a designer of just about anything. So let's get to the point. Lesson number 1. Here are, this is the beginning of the 10 lessons about game design that I learned from Carl Ronke. Hopefully all of the preface stuff now makes sense. This is seemingly the most obvious to repeat, and repeating is a negative word. A lot of people will say, well, yeah, I don't want to repeat myself or come out with the same thing. And that's not exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying repeat a process. And partially I'm saying that you have to practice. Practice makes perfect, but there is no real perfect in game design. I don't mean this as like you're not supposed to develop new content. Carl was, as I said about Carl, and guys, you can come up, there's some chairs up in the front. You're not going to disturb me. It takes a lot. I have giant balls. Carl has hundreds of games to his name. And it was very easy in the first 5 years that he could just simply repeat the content. Simply repeat the curriculum that he was throwing out there with people. In fact, I had talked to him recently, and he's a little older now, and I was telling him about the situation, maybe talking to him about this, and oh no, okay. I was saying, hey, we played this great game that at this conference, and he said, oh, that sounds great, that sounds awesome, and I'm like, yeah, I got it from your book. He's like, oh, well, that's good. He doesn't linger too much when he's thinking about this, but this is more about development. I think you need to constantly flex your game design muscle. Repeating a process until you become better is really important. There's no perfect in game design. We know that some of our favorite game designers have come out with things that are really crummy, but that's fine. I think that you constantly have to be trying to do new things and make new games. In fact, one of the things that, one of the things that I discipline myself to do is release a certain number of games in a year. And I say, well, what does that mean? What is releasing a certain number of games? And it just means that I want to make something that's playable and get it out to some friends or some folks and just see how it is, just to see, to challenge myself. And so I did that recently by making my own, I was inspired by the game Euphoria, and so in a day I made a board game that was ridiculously complicated and horrible. But it was a good learning experience. Carl still runs groups, and he still makes games. Sometimes he makes games that he made 30 years ago. That's excusable when you have a huge library and you're getting a little older. But he follows this evolving process, which brings us to lesson number 2, which is observation. And one of the key statements that I'm going to make today, if you want a quotable, but it's, unfortunately it was from my boss and not me. So my boss at ESI Design always says observation is a form of participation. And this is something that I feel very, very strongly about because I am an observer and I'm a wallflower. I'm someone who watches people play games. And like everyone replays in their mind their greatest gaming memories, and like some games, my greatest gaming memories is sitting on the couch watching other people play it. Like Metroid Prime. Man, what an awesome game to watch. It was so good to watch for me. I gave a lot of good advice. Don't die. Shoot that thing. Observing is how you improve as a game designer. It's how you find the fun. It's how you recognize that your audience, what they like and what they don't like. Carl is an excellent watcher. I always envision him like from Marvel Comics. He's just like is standing there on the moon watching down upon his group. And so he's always watching. He's trying to pick up the small signals that his group around him, the people around him are giving him by playing his games. What can you control in a game? That you kind of understand better what you can control by watching and learning from other people. And this is a basic tool from which all the other skills are born. Like observing and understanding is kind of how you get to a place where you can do things like iterate. And iteration is, I mean, these are the obvious. I put all the easy ones up front, all the obvious ones, right? So iteration is board and field games and video games are different, right? Everyone in the room wants to say board and field games and video games are all different. But in a lot of ways, they're very similar. So I have 2 tangents I'm going to drift off into right now. One is that it's really awesome to be able to go to an indie game festival and have board games and video games in the same place. It's awesome to go to like Indie Katie's, and we also have live action games there too. There may be live action games here. Maybe there are. Are there? No? LARPs, maybe something. LARPs are scary, but that's a little part of it. It's more like, I'm going to make a chart one day and explain where I am in the world, and it's close to LARP, but just like we have respected boundaries between us. but it's cool to do that because it turns out that, especially on the East Coast, we have this acceptance of the idea that game designers are game designers, which is a really excellent thing. And I think you should internalize that because, so here's this thought I had, which and part of my tangent, and this is my bullets are telling me to follow this. So part of my tangent is that the beauty of field games are that field games, the facilitator is present, right? But board games, they have to be mechanically sound. I mean, this is a very broad generalization, but board games have to be mechanically sound in order to work because the people who are running and facilitating it are the players. And so they can't have any gray area. There can't be really any interpretation to the rules unless you're playing like D&D or Munchkin, which is just full of gray areas and it drives me crazy. But like, if you have like a perfectly balanced game, and I'm suggesting that maybe Catan is, I don't know if it really is, if someone's like really a hardcore person, don't write me up, I'm Board Game Geek. All right, enough of that. But like, I'm suggesting maybe that's a perfectly balanced board game. There's probably better ones out there in the world. And you need to have, what was it? Yeah. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, say Catan was balanced. But that's like a perfectly balanced board game. You're not going to have any arguments because I can't be there to facilitate for you. Video games are a lot looser when it comes to mechanical soundness, and they can be a lot looser. They don't need to have the rules, the same kind of stringent rules that a board game has, because the video game is the rule master, and so the video game can do things like it could balance in the middle of the game, like in Mario Kart, or you can have a blue shell and have that be a reasonable thing, where it wouldn't necessarily be a reasonable thing in a board game, but I guess it's like shooting the moon a little bit. And then field games can be even looser, and I mean like really super loose, because I can just make up the rules as I go along, as long as I do it very confidently and I'm watching you guys. You guys will not know whether or not it's a horrible game. I'm just really taking the pulse of the room, and I'm going to change the rules as we go. As long as we never play it again, I'm going to be very successful. One of Carl's favorite games in that sense is Calvin Ball. The concept, as a concept, right? It's that Calvin Ball is just like a wonderful concept. But you can never, ever do that in a video game. Not very easily, right? Being able to constantly change what you're doing in the middle of a game is a really powerful thing, and it's a really powerful learning technique. It's something that you can do as, to become a better designer. And it always reminds me of this powerful moment on this documentary show called The Simpsons, where one of the lead characters, Homer, said, "Are they going to be taping this animated series live?" And the response was, "No, Homer, very few cartoons are broadcast live. It's a terrible strain on the animator's wrists," of course. Which is what I think, you could just alter that. Very few video games are programmed live. It's a terrible strain on the programmer's wrist, right? You can design on your feet when you're out in the field game world, which is an amazing thing. And it's actually amazing to watch Carl do this, because Carl will do exactly what I said, which is he'll have some idea of something that is fun, and he'll throw it out to the room, and then just see if we notice that it's a really terrible game or not. But as long as we're having fun, he'll be okay with that. And so he's using those first kind of 3 lessons, which is repeating and observing and iterating by throwing something out there and watching the room, and not sticking to a really crappy game too long. So lesson number 4, and this is where we start to get into the more cool stuff, which is find the fun. Let's talk about fun. So fun is this kind of crazy thing, and I don't mean to say that all games have to be fun. Certainly not all the things that Carl makes are intentionally fun, but fun is like, the majority of games have some sort of fun as their focus or as their goal. And sometimes fun is through game mechanics, and game mechanics are things like the rules and things like that, right? We all kind of have a general idea of what a game mechanic is. It's I throw something, you catch something, that's a game mechanic, right? But sometimes it's through spectacle, sometimes it's through narrative, or the pitch, through the role-playing of it can be fun. But fun is something that is engaging. The fun is a really engaging thing, but not all types of engagement are necessarily fun. But let's focus on fun. And let's break some games down into their foundational parts. And like football, right? So football has throwing throwing and catching, which is, it's fun for some people to throw, and it's really fun for some people to catch a football. I don't know, I actually can't place myself in a way that I would not think every time I caught a football that I was doing so in the most dramatic situation ever in the world, like that I'm like doing this. Even like in my head, the vision of me catching a football is always like in the Super Bowl, like as I cross the, I was about to say the finish line, and that would be like that. I also don't really understand football. But there's also, so when you break games down like that, and you find the fun elements of them, and football also, it's fun to hurt people, I guess. I mean, it's not fun for me because I'm the person who receives the hurting part. Like, even when I'm like, ha, I'm gonna knock you over, and then I'm like, oh, that hurt. But some people like that. And then, what is soccer, right? It's fun to do the things that they do in soccer. I know it takes, I think it's fun. I don't know, it's not really fun for me, but people seem to have fun. I think it looks fun when they're juggling it with their feet, but they don't really do that in the game. So I don't know, like, I think that they should have more games where they just juggle it with their feet. I think that would be, that looks like the most fun part of soccer. So what we do is we take the fun things, we identify the fun things. You find the fun, right? You find these little fun things and you rearrange them and you put them together in new ways. You know, like what if we did this game with a frisbee or something like that? And Carl is someone who is a master of fun. He's a master of finding fun elements, and that's one of the tricks that makes game design easy for him, because he could just throw an idea that's fun out to the room, and then make the game around that as they go. And that's a really powerful thing to have at your disposal if you're a designer of any type of game. The other thing is he doesn't get in the way of fun, so he doesn't really let rules stop him from allowing people to have fun, right? So if it was a certain situation where we were throwing balls and he recognized that throwing a ball and catching it in the end zone is the fun part of football, he would just have like 30 balls and everyone would be throwing them into the end zone and he wouldn't be caught up in all the points and so forth. Fun overrides all. And but how do you find the fun? First you observe and you watch people and you see how they react to things, and then you experiment, and then you memorize those mechanics and tell the future, right? Because part of design in general is predicting the future, and we as designers, especially if you're someone who's going to do video game design, because you kind of have to unleash it and put it out into the world, right? You have to take your video game and you have to put it in situations where you can't see the players as well. You can't watch their faces. And so what you need to do is once you need to kind of imagine what the player is going to be reacting to, and you have to put that, you have to go outside of yourself in order to do that. So if you know which mechanics work in general, you can make these large generalities. But finding the fun and then building upon it is a really key element of game design. And one thing that, like an overtold lesson or lore of game design world, and so I'll tell it and then we can never speak of it again for at least 20 years, is that SimCity originally was just an urban planning tool. And Will Wright had the foresight to see that people were not using it as an urban planning tool, they were just playing with it. And he said, hey, I'm going to just make that into a game.
Wasn't Minecraft developed similarly?
I'm not a Minecraft historian. I'm only a SimCity historian. So I can't, but you know what? Sure. I told you this isn't an academic talk. Quote me, yeah. Minecraft was developed in the 1970s as a tool for building bridges. And it turned out it
was a 3D CAD software, but no one was using it for what it was designed for.
Well, that's good. Okay. So now we've all learned something. One thing that we've learned today. Okay, here we are on lesson number 5. Fun things are fun, and other vague pronouncements. I told my friend, I was like, oh yeah, I think my talk name is Fun Things Are Fun, and he hated me for that. But it's always why I'm here. It's always why I go to these talks, and it started talking about it a little earlier, which is that there doesn't need to be a line between someone who thinks of themselves as a video game designer and someone who thinks of themselves as a board game designer and someone who thinks of themselves as a field game designer. I feel like if you make a game is a game, and you can make it in any sort of way, as long as you understand that there are different attributes and the context is different in each one of those, But what happens when you can stretch yourself and make a card game, for instance, when you're primarily doing video games, is that you can take elements that were fun on the video game side and put them into the card game world. This happens when we have things like Capture the Flag, right, which is a really fun and successful field game. Everyone seems to love that. And then you put it onto a screen and people really like it there too. It turns out that that's almost a direct translation and it works. Like what about Pac-Man? We looked at Pac-Man and we wanted to reproduce Pac-Man authentically in the real world, and it turned out that by making design decisions that were trying to replicate the mechanics of Pac-Man on the streets turned into a really fun and entertaining game. And obviously this is something I believe very strongly in, because in my field game portfolio I have live action Kaboom, which was a lot of fun. Not a lot of people are laughing because you don't know what that game is. It was on the screen. I have Field Frogger, which is it was at Indiecade and some other things, and it was really awesome and amazing. I have Field Cubert, which wasn't as successful, surprisingly. much more difficult than you think it would be. And of course, Field Tower Defense, which I won awards for, which is really cool. Things that are fun on the screen are fun out in the real world, and then sometimes things that are out in the real world are really fun on the screen, and the translations don't necessarily have to be perfect, but they can be inspired. And the neat thing when you're doing that type of design is that you're being inspired to think differently about the problem. You're inspired to take something that is fun in one world and bring it to another world, and it makes you go to a new place, which is kind of awesome. Carl never considered himself a game designer. He considers himself a fun designer, which is really interesting to me. When I kind of talked to him about this, I was like, well, I'm going to tell people about how, you know, you're a game designer. And he was like, but I'm not. Like, yeah, but what about all those books? They say games. They say they have games in them. Okay, I'm moving on now. It's not all fun, it's not all games. So this is one of the kind of heavy lessons in this, which is that sometimes you find something that's fun, and it's not going to be a game, and that's okay. Sometimes you need to challenge the restraints that are put on you, and you need to make some games that don't necessarily kind of look like games or feel like games, and then sometimes maybe they're not games, but who cares? It's just semantics. Right? Making something fun and enjoyable for people is awesome. This is my second Joust reference, is that Johann Sebastian Joust broke away from the screen, right? He said, I don't need to use this. And people still think that that's crazy. People still look at that and say, well, you can't do that. You're not allowed to make a video game that's not on the screen. But like, there are other games which do kind of break the video game rules, like Heads Up and things like that, which are very interesting. And they're very interesting and innovative, and they could be more interesting and more innovative if more designers decided to think that way. Instead, designers are making roguelikes and platformers, and they're seeing whatever the flavor of the week is. They're doing something that's generally easy and not looking to think about the problem in a whole new way. Why do we only have 4-player games? That sucks. 4-player games are boring to me. I mean, it's fine that Nintendo can do a 4-player game and make it amazing, but why don't we do 8-player games, or 10-player games, or 30-player games, or 50-player games? And you say, well, no, Pete, but we have those. It's Destiny and online. Yeah, it's like, yeah. I hear that. There are some of those, but you don't think that that's just another it's not another path that's just evolving in the same way that we were evolving from Wolfenstein to Doom to Quake to Half-Life to whatever. It's just all in the same line. Let's think differently. Let's get out there and make something that's fun. And when we make things that are fun, like the trapeze, we may realize that it's not a game, but it's still fun. Does it have to be a game? Can it just be a playful experience? Okay, so talking about things that are not games. I don't know why I took out my glasses for that. It was like a dramatic moment. I'm going to keep talking, but what I want everyone to do is get a rubber band. And so I'm going to actually just dump these rubber bands, just pass them back. Just take one. I have literally 1,000 of them. They are not latex, if that is a thing for you to worry about. I don't think that it should be, I mean, I know it should be for some people, but I didn't know that rubber bands could have latex in them, but apparently some do. I want you to stretch out this rubber band. You were doing it anyway because I was doing it, but I would like you to stretch out your rubber band. There are some more here. If you guys want to pass those back, just make sure everyone gets them. Okay, awesome. Yeah, there are piles. Now we can all have our own rubber bands for the rest of the day. Okay, we're going to do a playful activity that is not a game, but it's a playful activity. And this is where I mentioned challenge by choice. You know, one thing about Carl is you may have heard this term challenge by choice, and it's something that's his phrase, that's his quote. So challenge by choice is the idea that if you don't feel comfortable doing it, fine, that's fine. No worries. I'm not going to be offended. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this rubber band, put it on my upper lip right here, and I'm going to do it in front of you. And I'm the only person who's going to see you guys making a fool of yourself, so you have to, there's some respect here, I'm just saying. And I have to move the rubber band from my upper lip to my bottom lip without using my tongue. And here we go. Or my hand. Right. Ha! So I want you to try that. But if you do that and you do it much better than me and you're like, ha, I can do it. And I mean, if you have a beard, it's even more impressive. I'm just saying. Don't think that you're amazing yet, because the real amazing people can then move it back up. Okay, so guys, you try that, and I'll ramble on up here with my glasses. Life is better when it's more playful. Oh, this is a great picture. See, you should be up here. I'm not that interesting. The beards are the fun part, I really think. So you have all day to practice. Well, there are a lot of talks. I know people are going to be throwing a lot of information out there. It'd be really funny if everyone was in another talk and they were all just doing that.
I didn't get it back down.
Oh, that's good. I like your technique. You have some, yeah. Okay. So put those around your wrist, you know, and save it for later. Okay. So life is better when it's more playful. See, that was nice. That was a nice thing. 10. That's exactly what my screen says. That's accurate. I could have told you I should have the signs. Games don't have to be 2 or 4 people, they can be hundreds of people, or no people. Why not? Let's have no people games, like Salty Bets, right? I mean, Salty Bets has a game layer on it, but it's just like there are no people playing. It's still fun to watch. I have an aside on it, but I can't do it because I only have minutes. There are different ways of solving problems, lots of other things. Think like an amateur. Okay, think like an amateur. That's a really important thing to do. Is that one of the things that happens when you're designing video games is you assume that everyone plays it like you, and it turns out in most cases that's not, right? If you have released something out into the world and you thought that, I mean, if you have this experience, you may nod along, I don't know, maybe not. But some people will release something out and they'll be like, it's totally playable, and then they release it out and realize it's the hardest thing that's ever been out there because they've been playing it so long that they forget that they're really good at it.
Or there'll be that one puzzle that they designed that they're the only person who would ever think.
Yeah, who would ever think that way, exactly. No, of course you need the broccoli to hit with the lever, and then it will cause the ceiling to fall. Actually, I mean, one of the good lessons is go back and try to beat Pitfall 2. You only know how to beat Pitfall 2 because there's a weird ledge where you do a weird jump. You have to discover the weird ledge where you do a weird jump, and not only do you do a weird jump on that weird ledge, but you wait, and a balloon comes. There's no indication that that should happen at all in the whole game. Okay, lesson 7. Use what you have. It's like write what you know. Carl's best games came from the unique props that were around him. He had these like ski poles once that kept falling apart, and so he took these baskets at the end of the ski poles and he started throwing it at people, and that turned into a game called Asteroids and Ankle Biters, which is a ton of fun. Look around you right now. Look around you. What makes a good game? What makes a good game? The thing that you're holding in your hand right now, whatever that is, that makes a good game. That's what it is. Use what you have. You can make a game from anything. If so I have a note here. Look, I'm going to read it for what I have. Lectern. Sorry, I used the word lectern correctly, and I don't have one. This lectern, it's a spaceship. So you can also think like a kid when designing stuff. You just use whatever you have. If you have 1,000 rubber bands, make something playable. Throw what you have to someone else. Maybe it's fun to throw things back and forth. Maybe you'll find that much more rewarding for a group of people to throw whatever you have around. Where can I hide? The hilarity is that with software, theoretically, you can do anything, right? You're like, well, with software, I can do anything. But that's not necessarily true. You know, use what you have. It's also saying you can be ambitious, but don't be too ambitious. You know, I taught game design to kids, and the very first, they're learning how to be a game designer. They come in the first day, and I say, okay, what games do you want to design? And a kid comes up and he says, okay, you know Zelda? Oh, yeah. And he's like, and you know Smash Brothers? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm going to take Zelda and Smash Brothers and Minecraft, put them together. That's the game I'm going to make this week. That's awesome. Okay, so what we do is we think about games in terms of props and things like that in space. But context is the next lesson, and I'll speed through these bullets so that way we can play with the balls. Which is that context is really important, and that if I'm running a game with you guys, I kind of understand the context. Like right here, I'm like, well, can we hit the ball around? We're going to hit that projector, so we'll probably just go out into the hall and play the ball game. And context is important. I can read the room and I can adjust the game as necessary. But the problem when you throw things out there in the digital sense is that you don't necessarily think about context. If you're making a game, are you thinking like, what situation is that person in when they're playing the game? That's what context is. Where are they coming from? Where are they going to? And if you're at school, your game should look educational. At least it should look educational, because everyone in the room kind of knows the secret, which is all games involve learning, right? Every game you need to learn. It just depends on what you're necessarily learning. So when we look back at our favorite educational games, we're surprised because sometimes we were learning something that at the time didn't seem like what we were supposed to be learning. You know, Carmen Sandiego, I was learning that there was a lot of things I could click on to get what I wanted. I wasn't learning about history. Maybe I was learning about it from like a crossword sense, but I really wasn't getting anything out of the game. Certainly, Oregon Trail is about resources. It's not about, it's a math game. Everyone knows it's a math game, right? It's a math game. And it's a math game so much so that I now know that I can only carry 500 pounds of buffalo meat. So when you're thinking about context, you think about what the difference between Texas Hold'em is at a casino versus your friend's basement. And when you understand context, you can meet and exceed expectations. You can meet your players where they are. You know, the field is the frame of the game when we're doing field games. And you know, if it's snowy out, we can surprise people with games that involve the snow, right? But mobile devices, a lot of mobile devices do very, very well in having considering the context. I'll get to that in 1 second. But one other thing to think about when you're considering the context is that framing the game is really, really important. And framing is kind of how you set it up. Mary Flanagan talked about this study that how one sentence used to describe the game of Blockus, which is one of my favorite board games, dramatically changed the way that people played in such a way that like 60% more people won the first time they played by using the term spatial reasoning in the setup and explaining the rules, which is pretty amazing. And that's context, that's setting it up. Now there's a game called Desert Golf, you guys may have played it. I think Desert Golf is like the perfect touchscreen game. And it is something that when you understand the context of what people do on a mobile device, it actually understands the context. I can pick it up and I can play it for a couple seconds and I can put it back in my pocket. I normally am on a subway or something like that and I can do it with one hand if I have to. I can't do that with a Vita. I turn on the Vita, I load up a game, and by the time I set up my character or go through all the explanatory stuff in a game, because it's supposed to be like a PS3, my stop is there and I have to leave. So the last two lessons. Where no one wants to. No one wants to. You're not going to be a rock star. Don't do this because of the acclaim. Don't be egocentric about this. Carl is not really egocentric about this at all. He's actually a very super humble person. And also what that means is that if someone has a negative opinion of your game, just let it go, right? Who cares? I mean, look, there are more games. There are going to continue to be more games. Let those games exist. It's a wonderful world where there can be so many games. Because that means that we're making games for all sorts of people. Just because you like a particular type of game doesn't mean other types of games are bad. I have one of the lowest rated, I always say this, but it doesn't affect it. I have one of the lowest rated games on Board Game Geek. And it's not because it's a bad game, it's because the Board Game Geek audience doesn't really understand that game. It's not a Board Game Geek audience game. It requires you to walk around and do silly stuff. And that's not what Board Game Geeks want to do. Last lesson is be positive. Always, and never stop. Like, you have to keep working. You have to keep producing stuff. It's all part of the kind of arc of being a good designer, is that you can't stop. And collaboration really brings out the best in yourself and in other people. I encourage everyone to think about working with other people, because what's really amazing when you have good partnerships is that you can learn from one another, and that's something that Carl always did very well. Is that he would, whoever wanted to work with him would, like, he would learn from them, and they would learn from him, and they would bring out the best in each other, which is really kind of awesome. It's also the truth about contemporary life is that you can't do really big things without a whole bunch of people around you to help you and support you. Okay, let's go play some moon ball. So this is how it's going to work, because I don't want to hit anything up in the sky, and also we have like 15 minutes until the next presentation, I think, perhaps.
A quick question?
Yes.
So thank you for the presentation. I was just kind of curious, with the spirit of proposing games and that spirit of fun, do you have any ideas or tips for inviting people to do something new, or giving them the people a choice for something that they might not usually do?
So you mean gathering an audience?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking?
So say you said, well, this pen could be a game.
Yeah.
If I said, hey, does anyone want to play this?
So
Yeah.
be enthusiastic.
Okay.
This guy came to us for Come Out and Play, and he did a game that involved moving. He was an improv guy, or an actor, and he was about player movement, and that you would have to move based on what he was doing on his hand like this. And I watched him, and I was like, that's insane. But then he was so gung-ho about it, and it turned into this really awesome game that he did at Come Out and Play, where he was controlling people like this, and it was really kind of amazing. And other people would do that. He'd make a stage, and you'd be doing it with your fingers. So I just encourage you to go out there and do it. I mean, there's nothing that stops you from going out there and doing it, right? You come to a place like this, where you apply to something like Come Out and Play, or there are game test events all over the place. Go to meetup.com and find find those people who want to try something new, and they're out there, and they do want to try something new. So, or Facebook, sure, some people use that. I don't know.